My name is Jake, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk about the Great Reshuffle. A lot of people know this as the Great Resignation. Millions of people are quitting their jobs, they're leaving, they're doing something different, and a lot of it has to do to different priorities in their life. They've seen their parents work until they were 65 and really not be able to enjoy, their retirement, where they're maybe not as mobile as they were before, or they bought into the system, hey, I'm going to work my entire life and it will pay off later and I'll go travel in my 70s and my 60s and 80s and yada, yada, yada. You get it. In this video, I want to talk about financial independence and why making more money is so important if you're striving to be financially independent. My wife and I are looking to reach financial independence and retire early in the next coming years. This date has changed dramatically since we first started. A couple of years ago, when we first started planning out, okay, what date are we going to have to be able to reach FIRE? When we first started our FIRE journey, we thought that we were going to need anywhere from 10 to 15 years. Then with everything that's been going on with the pandemic, with our assets appreciating in price, with getting a new job, with learning more about dividend investing and how we can invest into certain companies that pay a higher yield and, based off our time horizon, we've moved that target a number of times. But making more money has been paramount to us being able to retire earlier. When we were first thinking about retiring early, we were thinking in our mid-40s, 45, 46, maybe 47. Now our goal is anywhere from 38 to 37 is our goal of reaching financial independence. And I'm not talking just lean FIRE, I'm talking real full-blown FIRE, being able to do whatever we want with our time. In today's video, we're going to talk about 4 topics. The first is going to be on the Great Reshuffle. I'm going to share a few of my thoughts around this topic. Second, we're going to talk about why 2022 is going to be the year to make more money. Whether you're a blue-collar, white-collar employee, this is the year to make more money. And then the third thing, I want to talk about how I was able to increase my income by 50%. I'm starting a new job this week and I'm going to be making 50% more every single month than I was in 2021. And I'm going to share a few things that you may want to consider if you're looking to quit your job this year in 2022. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about knowing your worth. Every single one of you watching this video, you have to know your worth. What was being paid for the same job 2 years ago is old news. It's history. The salaries that people can demand are much different today than they were just a few years ago. And it's very, very important that you know your worth. And I'm going to share with you how you can find out what the salary range is going to be for your role. And if you're greatly underpaid, it may be a time to consider whether or not quitting is the right move for you or moving on to something bigger and better. There's a lot of great stuff that we're going to cover in this video. I want to make sure that I can share as much as I can so that you don't have to look like this in your next interview.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Publisher?
Not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter, the big ones.
You probably have heard the term the Great Resignation. This has really come from the pandemic where people don't want to do those crappy jobs that they were doing before. They were getting paid barely minimum wage. They weren't able to hardly support their family. People in the millions on a monthly basis are quitting their job. They're resigning, they're leaving, they're going and they're doing other things. Some of this has to do with people quitting and retiring early. Some of this has to do with people just fed up and they wanted to go and, join the gig economy and do something completely different. But what I think is really interesting, what we're noticing here towards the end of 2021 and going into 2022 is we're seeing a transition from the Great Resignation into the Great Reshuffling. So what the Great Reshuffling is people are quitting, but they're moving on to bigger and better things. They're quitting one job because they got a crappy boss, they got horrible benefits, they don't enjoy what they're doing, they're not appreciated, and so they're going somewhere else. And a big part of it is they're making more money. Companies are understanding that they're losing employees because people are leaving just in the masses. And these companies, they understand this. And so if they want to retain top talent, they have to pay up. They have to pay more money. So you're noticing that a lot of people are quitting, but they're moving on to bigger and better things, whether it be more flexibility, they get to work from home, a hybrid work model, whatever it may be. But we're not seeing a great resignation where we're just seeing people completely leave the workforce. We saw a little bit of that in 2020 and the beginning of 2021. But right now, what we're seeing is we're seeing the great reshuffling where people are moving and hopping from one place to another place where they're more appreciated, they're making more money, and they have much better work-life balance. Now let me talk about why it is so important that everyone watching this video has to have on their radar the idea that they need to be demanding more money for what they're doing. Inflation is at a 30-year high. It's very likely here at the end of the year, here December, that we're going to even see a higher uptick into the 7+% inflation rate. So inflation is roaring. If you're buying a new car, if you're traveling, if you're buying appliances, you're seeing it. If you're buying meat or bread or milk, you're noticing those higher prices. Everything that consumers are buying, this is, the CPI index, this is the truest form in most cases when it comes to true inflation, what you and I as consumers are paying. And this is only going to increase. Inflation is baked into the equation of how the Fed and how the government views spending. Inflation is real. The CPI is real. We are seeing higher prices and people are paying it. People are making more money, but they're paying it. And I honestly don't believe that this is going to slow down anytime soon. Another thing that's really important, especially here in the United States, real wealth building in the United States is done through real estate, right? Have you ever heard of the American dream, right? Buy your own single family home in the suburbs, right? The American dream is really in single family homes, and single family homes are becoming out of reach for your average person. And the prices of single family homes are continuing to go up. Now, I'm not saying here that they may not correct, but I'm saying here is as prices go up, you're getting squeezed. The middle class, the average person is getting squeezed with higher inflation, higher cost of living. We're getting squeezed. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. When you look at the United States wages and salaries growth, we're seeing the largest uptick in about 40 years. This is great for white and blue collar workers. Those of you that are working a 9-to-5 job, now is the time to be able to demand more money for your labor, for the time that you're putting in and you're exchanging your time for money. Now is a great time to see an increase in your hourly wages. But as you can see here, this chart, that it is going down. I think here in 2022, I think we're going to have a strong, buyer's market, if you will, for employees. Employees can demand a higher salary because there is such a high demand. And what we'll see is that in this right here, that job openings are at an all-time high. There are so many jobs out there, but there's so few people that are there to fill those jobs. And if you have a talent or if you have a skill that is marketable, that is, something that not your average Joe can do, you can demand finally a premium for your work. You're not just another number. You're not as replaceable as you were back in the financial crisis, right? I remember trying to find a job during the financial crisis. It was horrible. If you were around during that time period, I remember trying to go find a job as a teller at a bank in 2000 and I think it was 2008, 2009. It was horrible. I went and there was 20 other people trying to apply for the same job. There was people with graduate degrees applying for the same job that I was with a high school degree. There's never been a better time for employees to be able to demand a higher salary and better working conditions, better benefits than there is today. Now I want to take a second and I want to share how I was able to increase my income by 50% here going from 2021 to 2022. For those of you that know my story, I started working out in a donut shop making $5.15 an hour. So I've worked a lot of service jobs. I'm now working as a sales manager at a major software company, and I work with a team and I sell software. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that have helped me to be able to increase my income. So the first thing that I think that is important is you have to understand I work for a software company. This is very different than working for the DMV or the government, right? Some companies, some industries, you work at the same job, the same company for 30 years. That's not the case for me in my line of work. It is very common for people in my line of work to move jobs every 1 to 3 years, give or take. And so I've held a handful of different jobs over the last couple of years. And every time I change jobs, I always get a pay increase because I understand what my worth is. So that's the first thing is you have to know your worth. You have to know what the market is going to pay for your job. Now, I'm going to get to that in just a second on how you can actually go and find the value of the role that you're in. And I'll talk about that in just a second. The next thing that's really helped me increase my income is I am at a point in my life where I've almost been doing the same thing for about 10 years. So the same thing in the sense of I've worked for this in the same industry, in the same role for about 10 years, but at different companies. Okay. And so now with my experience, I know what I'm worth and I know what I can demand in terms of salary. And so I'm able to interview for roles, positions that I know I'm qualified for. So now since I have a couple of years of experience, I only interview for for jobs that I know I'm qualified for because I don't want to waste my time otherwise. However, if I was first starting out and interviewing for an entry level or a junior position, I would apply for the job even if I didn't meet all of the qualifications. That is so important. If you're entry level, junior job, apply for as many entry level jobs as you can. When you get more experienced, you want to be more targeted with the type of companies and positions that you're interviewing for. So when you get in that interview, you can just blow them away and it's a lot easier. And then the last thing here, when it comes to increasing my income, it really comes down to practicing for the interview. In school, you would study for hours, hopefully, maybe not everybody, but hopefully you've studied for, when you have a test in school, you would study for the test. You would spend hours reading, learning, what's going to be the material on the test. Remember that? Remember when you were back in high school or in college, you would study for a test. Think of an interview the same way. You want to go into an interview prepared. You want to know what the company does. You want to know what the competitors of the company are. You want to know what customers the company has, right? All of those things, you want to be able to blow the recruiter away and be like, hey, this guy is really interested. He's done his research, right? You want to be able to, you want to prepare for the interview. Don't just apply for a job and just show up unprepared because I promise you, you're wasting their time and you're wasting your time. So really understand how to interview well. I can't stress it enough. A few things that I've really, that have really helped me, and you can Google this, you can watch a YouTube video on interview tips, but really be prepared, practice, do your research on the company, be on time, follow up after the interview, stay calm, don't go crazy, right? Dress the part, be prepared for the interview because the interview process is so important. But when it comes to increasing my salary, let me give you some of my tips of how I do this. So I'm a sales guy, I work in sales. So part of the interview process, I have to sell myself, right? And so whenever the recruiter or the hiring manager asks me, so Jake, what are you currently making? Or what is your expected salary or compensation? The key thing here is you have to understand negotiations. When a recruiter or anybody ever asks you what your expected salary is, never be the first person to give a number. So ideally, you want to ask them that question. But if they ask you, you're going to say, well, it depends on a few factors. It depends on if there's a base salary, if there's a compensation with commission. It depends on many different things. But here's the thing that you want to say. You always want to say, what is the allocated budget for this position? I promise you, I have used this on every interview of every job that I've ever gotten these last 5 years. And every time I ask that question, I make more money. Because when I go into the interview, I kind of have a range or an idea of what my compensation would be, but I don't want to lowball. So if I say, okay, my compensation expectations are this, this may be way lower or way higher, but you want them to say the number first. But ideally, what you want to do in an interview, you want to be the person that asks the question because it's easier. Before the recruiter says, all right, John, what's your compensation expectations? You want to say, hey, this sounds like a great opportunity. Just out of curiosity, what is the allocated budget for this position? And then the recruiter will say, well, it depends on a few variables. It depends on, there's a range. And then they may try to flip it back and say, well, what are you making? Then you want to make sure that you practice this, but never give a number and say, well, it depends. But yeah, just out of curiosity, what is the budget? And then you just repeat it. Never say it first. Just repeat it again. And so I did that exact thing that I just said for this job that I'm starting here this week. And I was able to get a 50% increase in my salary. When the recruiter said the budget, I almost had a heart attack. It was so high. I was just like, my jaw dropped. So I'm telling you, it takes practice, but there's a few tricks that you can learn when it comes to negotiating. But in order to increase your salary, a big part of it is your negotiating skills. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is knowing your worth, right? Well, how do you know your worth? There's a few different websites out there that you can actually get the salary ranges of specific positions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a position that I know very, very well because I am actually a hiring manager of this position. So I know this position very well. Every software company out there has a position like this in their sales department. It's called a sales development representative. Sometimes it's called a business development representative. What it is it's an entry-level position that, whether you have sales experience or not, this is where everyone in sales starts when they join a company, assuming that they have no prior selling experience. So a website that I like to use is LinkedIn Salary. You can type in the position and then you can see the salary range. And what you'll notice here is because this is a sales position, there's going to be a base compensation and a variable compensation. So that's very important that you understand that. The numbers that you're seeing here is just the base salary. So if you wanted to get the full salary, what you would have to do is you'd have to take the base plus the commission, and the commission is usually about a 70-30 split. So it's what's called an on-target earning, an OTE. So if you say you got about 80,000 OTE times 70%, that'll give you about your base. So your base would be about $56,000, and the remainder would be the commission that you would be paid either monthly or quarterly. So if you're looking for a sales position, that's very important that you understand that you're seeing, you're not looking at, oh, this job only makes $47,000 a year. That's horrible. No, this is only the base salary. It's not including the commission. All right, let's take a look at another one. Let's say, for example, a marketing specialist. A marketing specialist could be, anything under the sun. There could be so many different titles and responsibility when it comes to a marketing specialist. But a marketing specialist for maybe a junior role, you're making anywhere from $37,000 up to $74,000. The important thing here that you have to understand when it comes to maybe other roles outside of tech that I'm maybe not familiar with, it really depends on the industry and really it depends on the location. Somebody in California or in New York can be making 20 or 30% more than maybe somebody in North Carolina or maybe somewhere, outside of one of these larger metropolitan areas. So that's something to be really aware of. But this is how, you can type in any role or any company in here and you can see the expected salary range. So I really like LinkedIn Salary for this. Another website that I use that I really like is Glassdoor. Glassdoor, it gives you kind of similar or comparable results to LinkedIn Salary, but they give you a little bit more information about the role. They even give you a little bit about the compensation, right? The commission, talking about a sales development rep. the base salary, anything from 36K all the way up to 59K. That could also include a commission salary up to, $46,000, for example. But the important thing here is that you know your worth, that you're doing your research. And so I mentioned with me having had more experience in my field, it was easier to find a new job because I'm going to be doing the exact same thing, just at a different company, making more money. Now, I think if you're maybe doing a lateral move or you're changing careers altogether, that's going to look a little bit different. But what gets me really excited is for everybody that is really maybe out of college, or maybe they were a waitress or a waiter and they want to get into a different career field, whatever, there's so many opportunities for junior and entry-level positions. And you'd be amazed about how much money these companies are paying. It's absolutely remarkable. So whether you work in healthcare, you work in manufacturing, you work in retail, whatever role you're in, know your worth. And by knowing your worth, and knowing that you're prepared for the interview, you're going to perform much better in that interview, and you're going to be in a much better position to land that job that will hopefully help elevate your standard of living. And hopefully, if you're on your path to FIRE like my wife and I, it will help you to get to your goal much faster. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that you learned something new. And like I said, 2022 is going to be a great year. It's a great year to make some more money. It's a great year to either start or continue your path onto financial independence. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I'll catch everybody in next week's video.
You know what? I think we're gonna be friends. Can everyone say hi to my friend? That's crazy. I just wanted to say thanks. I'm glad you came along, partner.